better way. Through canals and alleyways, just the same. Money trees is the perfect place for shade, and that's just how I feel.
Yo, welcome to another edition of the Roundball Ramble podcast. I'm your host, Corbin Ford. You can follow me on Twitter at CorbinNBA if you are so inclined, of course. This is a SportsEthos presentation, so check out SportsEthos on Twitter at SportsEthos, online sportsethos.com, SportsEthos. Make sure to do that. You definitely won't regret it. They have everything you're looking for: basketball, baseball, football, gambling, fantasy, disc golf. Yes, disc golf. That is not a typo. So all of that is there. Definitely make sure to check them out. Listen, y'all, I'm going to be very brief. There's going to be just a very quick run through of the scores of last night. Today is Tuesday, the 17th of January. Had a really good slate of games for Martin Luther King Day, or on Martin Luther King Day, rather. But the star of the show is actually part 2 of a crossover that I'm doing with Steven Bagell of the Bird Rights podcast, where we are currently undergoing our mock trade deadline. 30 individuals representing each of our teams, each of the NBA teams, making deals, and coming on the show are a select few to kind of explain their rationale behind moves that were made, just the current stock of their squads and how things are looking. It's been a really fun show, and so you're going to get part 2 of that. Part 1 is already on our feed. Part 2 is here right now, so definitely make sure to stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, between time, let's go over some of the games that were done today. We're going to start with the big one for me. Well, there was 2 big ones, but the first big one was the Charlotte Hornets versus Boston Celtics, which coincidentally was the first game of the day. The Celtics won the game pretty handily, 130-118, really pulling away in the second half. But, I mean, it really wasn't that much of a competition. The Hornets, they've just been on a slump, as I talked about on yesterday's show, and that continues. Defensive, they had nothing for Jason Tatum, who had his 5th 50-point game of his career with 51 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists. He was one of 4 players for Boston in double figures, at 19 points and 8 assists for Derek White in his first game back since his neck sprain, which looked a lot more scary than it was. Malcolm Brogdon continues his strong campaign for 6th Man of the Year with 16 points and 4 boards off the bench, and then Marcus Smart had 10, while Robert Williams, Al Horford gave you 8 apiece, and Grant Williams helped with 9 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 assists. For the Hornets, leading scorer was top man Jalen McDaniels. I know, surprise, he had 26 points, knocked down some shots, really found a rhythm there. 25 points and 5 rebounds with 6 assists for LaMelo Ball. Double-double for Mason Plumlee. Nice looking stat line for Mason Plumlee, actually. 19 points, 12 rebounds, 7 assists. PJ Washington at 17 points, 4 boards. Terry Rozier had 14 points, but it just wasn't enough. This Hornets team, as we'll get to in a project that I'm going to be excited to unveil in the next week or so, just have a lot of improving that has to happen. Right now they sit 11-34, and yeah, between the holes on the defensive end, I think LaMelo Ball really needs to make a claim to step up in a major way on that end as well. They were just outmatched. I mean, it was one of the worst teams in the East versus one of the best teams in the East. There's not a whole lot to break down there. Raptors beat the Knicks by 2 in overtime, 123-121. Fred VanVleet, who was questionable coming in with some back pain, and I saw quite a few people on Twitter, that Raptor fans, that were not sure why VanVleet was going to play through it, but ended up putting up a game, just heroic performance in 45 huge minutes, had 33 points and 8 assists. 26 points for Scotty Barnes, along with 7 rebounds and 4 assists. 20 points for Pascal Siakam, 18 for Gary Trent Jr., and 10 for OG Anunoby. And that was just enough to outlast the Knicks in OT. RJ Barrett led the way for the Knicks with 32 points, including the dunk that really put into overtime. Coast-to-coast dunk off a missed free throw in the closing seconds of the fourth quarter. Really good play from him. 7 boards as well. Julius Randle had 21 points and 15 rebounds, while Jalen Brunson had 26 points and 7 rebounds. All in all, though, the Knicks even though they shot better from the field and were just below the Raptors from three, this was not a pretty game, folks. As far as shooting, they were behind in the assist margin. They didn't get enough blocks. They had more turnovers, and that at the end did it. So, good game for the Raptors. They're 20-24, still one of the teams that are in play as far as, I think, one of the Jenga blocks of this trade deadline in real life about what teams will or will not make moves. So I'm definitely curious to see where they go there. Grizzlies blew out the Suns, 136-106. Not a whole lot to say about this game. 29 points for Ja Morant, 28 points for Desmond Bane. They were 2 of 6 different players for the Grizzlies in double figures. You had 18 points and 8 assists for Jaren Jackson Jr., 13 points and 6 rebounds for Brandon Clark, 10 points apiece for both Tyus Jones and David Roddy. David Roddy threw in 8 rebounds. Jones added 8 assists and 5 rebounds as well. And Dylan Brooks and Steven Adams were just on the outside looking in terms of reaching double figures. So all in all, it was just way too much for Phoenix, who stuck in pretty well in the first half. In the third quarter, though, the Grizzlies broke it wide open with a 39-point third quarter, and then the fourth quarter they piled on 29 more points, while the Suns could only muster 18. And that, my friends, was all they wrote. For Phoenix, Mikal Bridges led the way, 21 points, 4 rebounds, 7 assists. DeAndre Ayton had 18 points, but only 5 rebounds. Not sure what happened there. Well, I know what happened. Steven Adams and Jaren Jackson happened. Dario Saric had 12 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 assists. And then off the bench, Saben Lee had 10 points. But that was it for Phoenix, who continue their downward slide. It has just been a horrific new year for the Phoenix Suns. The Jazz beat the Timberwolves by 1 point, 126-125. Jazz, as usual, had balanced scoring up and down the board. 7 different players in double figures for the Jazz, led by Jordan Clarkson with 21. Walker Kessler, who has just been tremendous for Utah, and one of the great rookies that isn't Paolo Banchero by a wide margin or Benedict Mathurin, has also played solidly. He has 20 points, 21 rebounds, and 4 assists. That's right, this is not a typo. 2020 for Walker Kessler. 14 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists for Mike Conley was nice and balanced, while off the bench, Ochai Agbaji added 17 points and Colin Sexton added 19 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 assists to make it nice and neat for Utah. For the Timberwolves, Anthony Edwards came to play, 29 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists. D'Angelo Russell, 21 points and 7 assists as well. Off the bench, Jalen Noel, Austin Rivers, Taurean Prince all scoring double figures. And Kyle Anderson messed around and got a triple-double. 13 points, 11 rebounds, 10 assists. But unfortunately, it was not enough as they fall to 22-23, and the Jazz move up to 23-24. The West, my friends, is a nightmare. Warriors had a strong fourth quarter to outlast the Wizards, 127-118. You had a 41-point game from Steph Curry with 7 rebounds, while Jordan Poole came off the bench to add 32 of his own. Draymond Green got into it and started scoring, actually. He had 17 points, which seems crazy to think about, along with 6 rebounds and 10 assists. Andrew Wiggins had 14 points and 4 assists. And then off the bench, Dante DiVincenzo and Anthony Lamb both played well to help the Warriors actually get one of their rare victories that weren't at home. For the Wizards, big guy was Kristaps Porzingis, literally and figuratively. He had 32 points and 5 rebounds. Wish we had some more boards from the guy, but okay. Monte Morris had 17 points and 10 assists, while Kyle Kuzma added 16 points and 11 rebounds with 5 assists in 40 minutes. Off the bench, Rui Hachimura added 16 points of his own. Ultimately, though, too much Steph Curry, too much Warriors in the fourth quarter. The onslaught was of 34 points to 25, and that really was what decided the game there. Hawks held on to beat the Heat 121-113. Hawks had pretty much control of the game for most of this game until, I would say, around the fourth quarter third quarter, I'd say, where the Heat stormed back with a 30-point third quarter to the Hawks only scoring 21, and then the fourth quarter was nip and tuck, but the Hawks were able to make just enough big shots to hold the Heat at bay, and the one who led the way for the Hawks, DeJounte Murray, made a big 3 and 1 to really keep the Hawks ahead for good. Had 28 points, 4 rebounds, 7 assists on very good efficiency. Trae Young also was efficient, 24 points of his own with 8 assists. DeAndre Hunter and John Collins both scored in double figures, 15, 4, and 4 for DeAndre Hunter, while Collins had 14 points and 4 assists. Looking at Collins and his numbers, especially, again, as we approach the trade deadline, because I really feel like he's going to be moved. Off the bench, Clint Capella made his triumphant return after missing a series of games with a variety of different injuries. Only played 27 games for the season, but he had 12 points and 6 rebounds in 21 minutes, while A.J. Griffin also played well, 12 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists for him. For the Heat, Jimmy Butler led the way with 34 points, and let me tell y'all, it was some of the easiest 34 points I can remember in recent memory. Just a lot of runouts, a lot of dunks, getting to the free throw line, which he does already tremendously. Only added 3 rebounds and 3 assists as well. When you play like that, sure. Bam Adebayo had 20 points and 13 rebounds to go along with 5 assists. Tyler Hero had a horrific shooting night from the field, but somehow managed to cobble together 15 points along with 5 rebounds and 4 assists. Off the bench, Gabe Vincent had 10 points and 3 assists, while Victor Oladipo did a little bit of everything, 7 points, 6 boards, 10 assists. Only other guy of note from Miami was Max Strus, who had 13 points, but that was all they wrote. Atlanta just played strong from the beginning, made it tough for Miami to get going offensively, anyone not named Jimmy Butler, of course, and held on because the Heat came back on the warpath in a major way to get this victory here. Aside from this, one other game to touch on, well, 2 other games to touch on, excuse me. The Cavs beat the Pelicans 113-103 despite losing Donovan Mitchell a little bit into the game with a groin strain. He only had 11 points, but the Cavs are led by Darius Garland's 30 points, 6 rebounds, and 11 assists, as well as Jared Allen coming up clutch with 24 points and 11 big rebounds and 5 assists for him. Evan Mobley had 19 points and 8 boards, and those were the 3 big Cavalier performances. While for the Pelicans, CJ McCollum 25 points and 4 assists, while Jonas Valanciunas had 22 points and 13 rebounds. Najee Marshall had 14, Trey Murphy gave you 17, 2 and 2. Off the bench, Jose Alvarado gave you 10 points and 5 assists, and that was all they wrote. Just not enough consistent offense up and down, and then when they had it, it was good, but that Cavs front line is also an issue. And let's face it, the Pelicans don't have a quantity of great outside shooting right now. If you're looking at their starting 5, is really CJ McCollum, Trey Murphy, right? Dyson Daniels played 29 minutes, 4, 3, and 4 points, rebounds, assists, respectively. Najee Marshall can shoot it, but definitely not someone that you're really closing out hard on. And after that, Devontae Graham only had 6 points in 14 minutes. He would be someone you consider a shooter. Larry Nance, not so much. And Jose Alvarado, I would say the same thing. And that was what did it. So we'll see, how the Pelicans continue to play without their big guys, because that kind of is a thing there. But they're still a deep team. I think the fun thing about deep teams is they're always fun to say they're deep until they actually have to play games without their stars. Because then it's okay, can you replicate that type of play? Can you be like the San Antonio Spurs teams of, I want to say, almost a solid decade from 2009 to 2019, where their backups could play games while you sat the starters and come up with a reasonable facsimile of the starting level production from different guys. It was really crazy. Haven't seen anything quite like that since, but that was something to behold. Last game of last night, the Lakers beat the Rockets 140-132 in a fun game that was uncomfortably close down the stretch, but of course it would be because it's a Lakers game. LeBron James continues his quest to the top scoring ever in NBA history as he piled on 48 huge points, 8 rebounds, and 9 assists. Monster game for him. Russell Westbrook at 24 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists. But the Lakers got more double-digit scoring, Kendrick Nunn had 15. Wenyen Gabriel, 14 points and 9 boards. Patrick Beverley actually got into double figures with 11 points. So a lot of guys came in and contributed for the Lakers, and they needed it. Because the Rockets, they're a young, scrappy team that weren't going anywhere. Despite not having Kevin Porter Jr., who was out with a toe injury sustained against the Sacramento Kings in the Rockets' most recent contest, they had production from Alfred Sengun, who came up with a huge game. In 37 minutes, Sengun had 33 points, 15 rebounds, and 6 assists. Jalen Green had 23 points and 5 rebounds. Really came on big in the second half. Started horrifically shooting from the field to begin, but definitely found fire in that fourth quarter. Eric Gordon, my guy Eric Gordon, had 19 points and 8 assists. Kenyon Martin Jr. had 17 points and 7 boards, while Jabari Smith Jr., 14 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. Is he going to be Rookie of the Year? Probably not, but I like him. I just really feel that the potential of that kid is still high. Maybe isn't what I was thinking going into the draft, but definitely someone I definitely want to see continue to grow and build with this squad. But yeah, LeBron, what else is there to say about this man that hasn't already been said? 48 points in 36 minutes. If the Lakers didn't have this production from LeBron, I don't think they win this game. I just don't. And there's no knock on Russ or any of these other Laker players. It's just not only how good LeBron is, but how good LeBron needs to be for this team. That is both awe-inspiring and also very, very scary if you're a Lakers fan. Because, like, that's a lot to put on a 38-year-old shoulders. I'm sorry. The NBA is it's not an old person's game. It's a game of the young. And even when it is an old person's game, it's really when your mind and body kind of reach that sweet spot where you can see the game well in advance while your body can still be capable of making plays to take advantage of that. LeBron James defined all manner of that. He's averaging clearly the most of any player, age 38, into his 20th season. There's not a whole lot of the guys that could say that. There really isn't. Kobe had, 17? Kareem had 10, and then Dirk had 7 points per game. Like 29.8, 17 for Kobe, 10 for Kareem, and 7 for Dirk. There's a wide age gap between all of that. It's just something crazy. And listen, we say enjoy it while you see it, but honestly, we haven't seen anything like this before, and I think we'll be hard-pressed to see something like this happen again. At least not anytime soon. LeBron is 1 of 1, and these type of performances are just that, 1 of 1. So I don't want to say enjoy it while you can, but listen, y'all, we fans of the game, we can't take this for granted. This is insane. At this rate, he will definitely have Kareem's record by early February, the way it's going. What else is there to say about this man that hasn't been said on the basketball court? I don't know, so I'm going to stop talking. Anyways, that is the slate of games for last night. As far as today, got 4 games lined up. This is my Mountain Standard Time, so your time may vary, adjust accordingly. But at 5:30, the Raptors will be playing the Bucks. That game is on TNT. League Pass has 2 games, the Nets versus the Spurs. 2 teams that have been slumping as of recently. We'll see who snaps out of it first with the victory tonight, while the Blazers will be playing the Nuggets, also a League Pass game, also should be a fun game. And then the last game on TNT will be at 8 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. That will be the Philadelphia 76ers coming to play against the Los Angeles Clippers. I'm definitely excited about that matchup as well. Joel Embiid, James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, Terrence Mann had a huge game. We'll see what happens there. Should be a fun matchup. So one more time, Raptors Bucks at 5:30, Nets Spurs at 6, Trailblazers Nuggets at 7, and 76ers Clippers at 8. All evenly staggered. All should be very fun. So make sure to tune in for that. Alright, so I'm done talking, y'all. Sit back, tune in. We still got more show here for y'all. Y'all thought these 15 minutes were done. That's not it here for the Roundball Ramble. Now is part of the crossover between me and Steven Bagell as we interview some really fun guests about our mock trade deadline and talk about the deals that were done, why they were done, and have some fun with it. So sit back, relax, and enjoy that. Until you hear my voice next time, I am Frosty. Y'all stay frosty, and I'll talk to y'all real soon. Alright, y'all.
What's going on, party people? I'm your host, Steven Bagell, and this is SportsEthos' very own The Bird Rights Podcast. However, as you guys know, we are doing joint episodes, crossover episodes, if you will, with Corbin Ford from the Roundball Ramble podcast, another SportsEthos production. So you will hear this on both of our feeds. Corbin, how are you doing today?
I'm muted, so I'm on classic Corbin form. But I'm doing great, Steven. Happy to be here, like you said. Crossover time's great. Having guests on top of that's even better. And we're talking basketball and trades. What's better than that?
Yep. And as you guys know, Corbin and me did do our introduction to the mock trade deadline, how that exercise works. We have 30 participants. Obviously, every participant's representing one team, mostly teams that they follow closely. We have a lot of beat writers. We have a lot of fans representing those teams. Then we have general NBA media, some salary cap experts taking over the leftover teams. So we are happy to present our first guest of this installment. We have Logan Alton, who is representing the very own Minnesota Timberwolves. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Logan, go follow him on Twitter at LAltonNBA. That's LALTEN NBA. Logan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you guys?
We're doing well.
Yep.
As we talked about in our first segments, very busy time of year. Corbin is one of my right-hand men with this exercise. And as we talked about, I'm involved in every negotiation going on in Discord. So this is, just about a full-time job for me. And again, I'm not complaining about it, but it's definitely the busy time of year for me in the aspect of all the front office stuff going on. So let me see. Logan actually is the one who got us kicked off in the mock trade deadline. He was involved in both of the first two trades. And Logan, as I said, is representing the Minnesota Timberwolves. And last episode, Corbin and I talked about how Minnesota, along with maybe the Atlanta Hawks, were two teams that might have made a trade too early to try to get into the top tier of competitors. And it really hasn't worked out that well, as opposed to like the Cleveland Cavaliers when they trade for Donovan Mitchell. Seems to be working out a lot better. So, Logan, before we get into the trades that you made, what did you want to accomplish as Minnesota coming into this exercise, given, I think they're on like a 5-game win streak now, so maybe things are starting to turn around. Karl-Anthony Towns should be coming back soon. But overall, what do you think you wanted to accomplish as Minnesota? And does that mirror what you think Minnesota should be doing in real life at the deadline?
Yeah, so first off, I think they're only on a 2-game win streak because they're a meme of a team and lost to Detroit.
Yeah.
But I totally agree that they kind of pushed their chips in a little too early and maybe for the wrong type of player. But what I was trying to accomplish is do what I think they would do rather than do what I would want to do. And that's kind of free up salary flexibility, get like assets that aren't going to expire. They're going to have their books tied up. So some of these guys that are going to be eligible for a pay date, you may want to reshuffle the deck, either get a pick or a player that has more years left on their deals. That way there's not the tough decision of should we pay fringe player X or should we let them walk? How do we replace them then? And so on. Versus what I would have done is probably trade one of the centers. Even though one of them isn't eligible to be traded, which is Karl-Anthony Towns.
And Cat's interesting. Again, I don't want to spend all the time talking about the possibility of Cat getting traded, but you just gave a full unprotected first for Gobert. If this season, if they end up as a playing team, it really wouldn't shock me if all of a sudden, D'Angelo Russell is an expiring deal. If they let him walk, him and Cat have that close relationship, obviously. I don't know if it would shock me if Karl-Anthony Towns is the next big star to request out.
See,
but
I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on real quick.
Okay.
I have this conspiracy theory. I think Tim Connolly acquired Rudy Gobert as an out to get out Karl-Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell. And it makes sense. You can't be this big GM that's coming in and then be like, okay, I don't think Carl is necessarily a winner. I'm going to trade him, because the fans would be outraged. But if he kind of shoots the team in the foot for a year, now it's way more plausible.
Interesting. Okay, look, I have to ask a question about that, because on the one hand, that's some masterclass thinking. I could totally see an idea of that, but at the same time, to just use up almost all your draft capital, and put yourself in a spot where, this team, that's diabolical if it's what we're thinking, because this team is coming off of, really good playoff run. The first they've had in 4 years.
The second they've had in 15 years.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And this momentum ain't just gonna explode. People loving Cat embracing the fans after, the tumultuous 1.5, 2 years that he's had, all of that. And I understood, I didn't like it at all, but I understood new GM splashing move, especially a guy you were associated with, whatever the case may be. But if that is the case, which it could be, a backdoor way of saying, hey, maybe you should leave and make it think it was your idea. But why subject your fans to that? Oh man, that's some galaxy level villain stuff right there, Logan.
Yeah, it even makes sense of the overpay, because if Rudy Gobert was properly valued in a trade, you could in theory be like, okay, Rudy's the problem. We are trading him and getting 90 cents on the dollar, versus we paid $8 on the dollar for Rudy. So you can't reasonably be like, okay, Rudy's not working. We're going to sell him for a quarter on the dollar now and like go get a Ben Simmons for Rudy Gobert instead, because that would just be a big loss and you would look so bad. But Cat, you can properly get value for Cat, like a Trae Young. Kind of fixes things for both teams.
I like that. Okay. Corbin, you have something to add?
I have one last question. Yes,
Okay.
I mean, just before we kind of move forward, I want to just stay stuck in the back just for a minute. There was talk, I guess, some rumor, I don't know how much truth there was to it, of a Minnesota's original trade target being a DeJounte Murray before Cat. I don't know if that was something that really had any traction or anything, but I do want to get your thoughts on that in this alternate universe that, Conley doesn't try to push Cat out. Do you think that would have been a better fit with the Timberwolves in this day and time or case in time, especially given how D'Angelo Russell's been rather, I love the guy, but uneven over the last couple of years, to put it lightly.
Yeah, DeJounte Murray would 100% be the better fit in every regard. One of the things that the team suffers the most from is just lacking a legitimate point guard, especially with Jordan McLaughlin out. D'Angelo Russell is a great player in his own right, but he's more of a combo guard parading around as a point guard. And like you see the offense suffer when Jalen Noel or Anthony Edwards are running it rather than Kyle Anderson or Jordan McLaughlin are running it.
Definitely get that.
And the the guard defense would be so upgraded.
Absolutely, for sure.
Okay.
Especially with Johnson shooting too. Anyway, sorry.
You're fine. So I just want to, again, Logan has made so far on the mock trade deadline 2 trades. Before, my dog is trying to play after not wanting to play all day during the podcast. But anyway, before I get into this 2 trades that Logan made, I just want to quickly talk about D'Angelo Russell, because I already mentioned he's an expiring deal, and I know Minnesota has been experimenting recently with Anthony Edwards as the lead guard and the playmaker, and results have been mixed, but I'm starting to think Minnesota's kind of prepping for that reality of, okay, we're going to let D'Angelo Russell walk because he's not worth what he's going to demand in free agency. So, here, Anthony Edwards, you're going to be our initiator, our primary playmaker, whatever you want to call it. So, Logan, what do you think about the possibility of D'Angelo Russell either not being back or him being traded at the deadline to recoup some kind of value for him? And I'll give a little sneak peek. Logan has approached me in the mock trade deadline about Kyle Lowry. If you guys didn't listen to episode 1, I am the Miami Heat. And I believe it was either Mark Stein or Yossi Goslin, who's another participant in our exercise. He said with Hoops Hype through Mike Scotto that that's a possibility, that the Heat and Timberwolves have discussed a framework, or it would make sense for them to discuss a framework of Kyle Lowry, so Miami avoids the tax given D'Angelo Russell's expiring. So, Logan, just what do you think the overall sentiment is? I mean, you obviously approached me about a Kyle Lowry plus something small plus a second-round pick swap for D'Angelo Russell. Is that something you think that would make sense for Minnesota?
Yeah, just the overall deal sentiment, like I think Minnesota is definitely getting ready to be without him, whether it is in a trade or it is letting him walk in free agency or via sign a trade. But I think, like last game, for example, Jalen Noel closed over him, and that somebody closing in D'Lo's place is not all that rare nowadays.
Okay.
But like, I think it was Stein actually reported earlier today as well that Minnesota isn't interested in Kyle Lowry, which is a bummer. But I think the biggest thing between those two is Minnesota views Kyle Lowry as a salary dump because of that $30 million in 2023-24 versus the Miami Heat view him as
an asset,
an equal value to D'Angelo Russell, essentially. Like, I'd imagine Miami probably came to the table with an offer of like a second, and then Minnesota came to the table with an offer of like a first and maybe even like Jovic or something.
Yeah, that's interesting. And As Miami, one, I believe the framework you came to me with was Lowry and Caleb Martin with the second round pick for D'Angelo Russell. It was something along those lines. And my hesitation was I'm already discussing Caleb Martin in a million trades just because of the aspect that Miami doesn't really have that mid-tier salary to offer in other trades. Duncan Robinson is unmovable. Nobody wants him. I'm most likely going to have to salary dump him if I move him. And Victor Oladipo has a 1-year no-trade clause. So that brings everyone back to combining Caleb Martin and Dwayne Dedmon to try to get that mid-tier salary to upgrade. So that's why, I've been hesitant more than anything as Miami. But before I spoil too much, we still have plenty of time in this exercise. Everything's going to be up on SportsEthos.com. We're going to have our own tab of the mock trade deadline with, every negotiation, everything going on. I'm going to be doing plenty of write-ups. But Logan, let's get into the 2 trades you did make. You started off the whole exercise with the first trade sometime last week. I think the first day we started it. You and Ez, who were representing the Raptors, basically did a swap of you traded Jalen Noel to Toronto for Malachi Flynn. And this one was interesting because, as you just said, Jalen Noel was in the closing lineup over D'Angelo Russell in the last game. I like Jalen Noel a lot, but putting my GM cap on, Minnesota very well could go into the tax. And I believe it was Keith Smith from Spotrac basically did a free agent series on how much he anticipates some of these upcoming free agents getting paid. I believe he had Jalen Noel in the $8 to $10 million a year range. And Minnesota, again, tight with money. I'm not sure they're going to be willing to pay Noel that kind of money. So is that along your lines of thinking that Malachi Flynn has an extra year on his rookie deal next year, so you don't have to pay him meanwhile? And maybe he could be the point guard, because Noel is more of a combo guard. He's not really a primary initiator. So maybe Malachi Flynn could be that backup point guard that if you lose D'Angelo Russell, I don't know. What was your line of thinking with that trade?
Yeah. There may have been an agenda. Jalen Noel can be fun to watch, can be a good player, but he is tough to watch at times too. He's another guy like D'Angelo Russell where the idea of him is dope. When he's hitting, he's fantastic, but when he's not, it can be painful. So I'm surprised Keith said that Noel's market was that high. I was
surprised when I read that too.
I would have guessed his market would have been like the taxpayer MLE. But yeah, that is my way of thinking that like Noel's gonna have to be paid, and I don't think Minnesota has the means or should think about it. He's an unrestricted free agent too. There is a really good chance that when Jordan McLaughlin comes back, that the guard rotation is D'Lo or guard that we traded D'Lo for, and Ant starting at the 1 and 2, and then behind them is Jordan McLaughlin and Austin Rivers. Or Jordan McLaughlin starts and guard X comes off the bench. I could reasonably see that Jalen Noel is out of the rotation. Similarly, I could see that Malachi Flynn is out of the rotation, maybe even in Iowa, getting some reps in. And having that extra guy under a contract who in theory has like a second round value is good, because Minnesota needs those guys. They need to be able to have flexibility for trades. They need to, like, if draft time comes and they have player X circled, Malachi Flynn is a good like starting bid for that guy. And then you can move from there.
I'm just interested because I don't hate the move at all, because I don't know if Jalen Noel is going to be worth that $8 to $10 million that he's probably anticipating on getting per year. But I can't see a scenario where Minnesota doesn't bring either him or D'Angelo Russell back next year. But it's not like either of them like a real, I'm not saying they're not difference makers, but clearly Minnesota has both of them right now, and they're a playing team. So I'm not sure how much bringing one of them back would even really help them. I guess it's just more bring back a playmaker who's a score first point guard than anything, because they at least know your system, rather than relying too much on a Jordan McLaughlin or, in the scenario, Malachi Flynn.
Yeah, I think a Jalen Noel is a dime a dozen, and you could reasonably get one of them in like an early first or early second, I mean, of a draft. Like even going like if we went through free agent guards, I would say that I could circle about 10, 15 guys in the mid-level range that Minnesota could go grab and replace Jalen Noel with. That would be like a better fit and more consistent player.
Okay. So then let's quickly talk about the second trade that you made. And again, you made the first two trades. You kind of came in, made a splash, and now at this point, you're just kind of evaluating the market and see what comes to you. But the second trade was another guy who's about to hit unrestricted free agency, and that's Naz Reid, who has been really freaking good since Karl-Anthony Towns has been out. But same thing, you said you want to get more cost-controlled guys that weren't on expiring deals. Naz Reid is expiring, and I did look at that article that Keith Smith posted on Spotrac. He at the time said Naz Reid is probably going to be signing for $6 to $8 million annual value a year. And that was before he started playing really well. He honestly might have played himself into that Jalen Noel money, $8 to $10 million.
That is wild.
Yeah, I don't know, because the backup center market or low end starting center market varies every year. I mean, we're seeing Andre Drummond play for minimums nowadays. So I don't know. Naz Reid could very well get squeezed. But basically what you did was a Utah approached you for Naz Reid. You flipped Naz Reid to Utah along with the Knicks second round pick. So let's say a mid seconds is going to be the Knicks seconds. And you got a 2023 first that is the least favorable from Utah, the least favorable between Brooklyn, Houston, and the Sixers. So, the least favorable between Brooklyn and Houston's first and the Sixers first. So it's most likely going to end up being the Sixers or the next pick.
Yep.
So let's say you basically traded a mid-seconds and Naz Reid for a late first. And as I told you before we came on here, it's very reminiscent of what Masai Ujiri did last year when they traded with the Spurs to get Thad Young. They traded their seconds, or they traded a first for a mid-second and Thad Young. So essentially, they took Thad Young to move down 20 spots in the draft. You essentially did the same thing here. You moved up 20 spots in the draft by moving off of Naz Reid, who, again, is due for a payday, but given you already have Gobert and Katz, how much are you realistically going to pay me? Or pay him. Pay me. Excuse me. But I know you are I think you are a Nathan Knight guy. Is that correct?
Yep. And Luka Garza has been fantastic too.
Yeah,
Garza has been very solid.
So was that just the same rationale as Noel? You were getting off the expiring deal, and obviously you didn't bring anybody back with this deal, so it's not like you brought another cost control guy, but you moved up 20 spots in the draft, so you're going to get a guy on a rookie deal with it, as opposed to a mid-second round pick that most likely wouldn't have even become anything, because more oftentimes than not, second round picks don't even hit. So is that really the rationale? Let's bring in a cost-controlled guy with a late first, so it will be a pretty relatively cheap rookie year deal. We'll get restricted rights on him at the end of the year, so if he works out, we have him for 7 or 8 years. For now, it's like, is this really the long-term vision that you had, or you just wanted to get off a guy you weren't going to be able to pay?
Basically, Naz Reid is an unrestricted free agent. Same with Jalen Noel. They were both Naz Reid was undrafted and Jalen Noel was a second round pick. And they did their 4 years, didn't get the restricted free agency in that third year because we accepted the team options. And basically, why would Naz even consider coming back? And that's kind of where I was. Like, there's 2 star centers in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
And Naz, he's either going to be playing out of position, not get many minutes, and it just doesn't make sense to stay, even if like he gets a similar offer from whomever is like Minnesota versus like a Chicago team or what have you,
Dallas or something.
Dallas, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically like, can I get first for Naz Reid was what my way of thinking, or a player that is an upgrade that's cost controlled and fits long-term positionally. Like, I used to think that like before the season, Peyton Pritchard would be a good option for Naz Reid.
Mm-hmm.
And like that type of swap, or Jalen McDaniels. But since I was just approached with the first, I was like, yeah, that feels like a home run. I don't think Naz Reid would, unfortunately, fetch it first because you only have half a season with him now, and he's a fringe starter, good backup caliber player, and usually you don't give that value up for them.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. I guess I have a question. Between the two trades you made, I mean, obviously, big Minnesota fan, you know Naz Reid's value on this team. You just know the realistic, logistical aspects of him being retained. But was it hard in this space, in this constructed world of parting ways with the player that you may kind of be fond of, but are you just being more pragmatic in the sense of, hey, this is what needs to be done. It's going to happen in the road anyway, so let's just cut off early and get some assets recouped while we do. I kind of want to get your mindset in doing that because I agree. Naz Reid's been a fan favorite. He's been a guy who's played really well in several games this season. I think you know better than I do. The Wolves flourish after when Cat's out or Gobert's in foul trouble. You bring Naz in at the center, and he's able to galvanize that starting lineup and bring that energy and just some crazy dunks, some good shots, that sort of aspect. So I guess I'm curious for a person making moves in mind of the actual team. Is it hard to sometimes look, okay, I don't really want to do this, but listen, we got to cut ties. I got to see if I can get something because I wish the front office would do this.
Yeah. So I think I mentioned this earlier, but I did this not as how I would do it, but as how I think the Timberwolves would do it.
Yeah.
And I think the Timberwolves would go that way. But me, myself, Naz Reid would be staying. I would be trading one of the other centers.
You did say this, and I know, but when you said that Cat might be that's what I thought was funny though, because in my mind, I'm thinking if the master play potentially is Cat being moved, even though it's not reality as of now, right? Did you consider ripping the Band-Aid off and doing it? Because I know you're playing more realistic GM in this case, but if the GM, as you you said, the tinfoil hat is that they're eventually going to do this. Did you think, well, let's just see what's up right now?
Yeah. It was really tough because I didn't want to push too far into my conspiracy theories, and if you're getting a first for Naz Reid, I think that's a home run. If the Timberwolves today came out and said they traded with I don't think Milwaukee or Denver have their picks, but if they trade for what's going to be the 29th to the 30th pick for Naz Reid, I would still think that's a good deal. And I don't think it'd be realistic to be yeah, Minnesota's going to keep Naz Reid. There was a report that came out yesterday, I think it was, where they said that the sides weren't even close on extensions. And that makes sense because why would Naz stay? Why would he extend? And yeah, differentiating the two, because between you guys and me, there have been many games where Naz Reid has outplayed Rudy Gobert.
Yes, there has.
Mm-hmm.
And he just fits better. He makes more sense. And everybody has more chemistry. I think once a point guard comes along, Rudy's going to start shining. Once some of these guys adapt more chemistry to Rudy, he's going to start shining. Kyle Anderson has slowly developed some really good chemistry with Rudy Gobert. And it's shown it's helped both of them play out better with each other. But Anthony Edwards, he's still throwing it up into the front row rather than getting out Rudy Gobert on an alley-oop. And that's been a really slow burn to get them to figure out how to play with each other. And D'Angelo Russell is giving him bounce passes, which are always turnovers too. But
especially with his bad hands, because his hands are historically bad. They're not laid down right in his breadbasket. He fumbles them, right? It's kind of crazy.
Yep. But once a point guard comes along, Rudy's gonna be fine. But as of right now, if you gave me the choice of, and this is gonna sound wild, but if you gave me the choice of Rudy Gobert being in the rotation, or rolling with Naz Reid starting and Nate Knight or Luka Garza coming off the bench, I'm picking Naz Reid starting and Nate Knight or Luka coming off the bench. Because they all just make more sense. They all just fit. The team is better with them rather than Rudy.
Wow.
And I think a lot of that goes back to what Coldemy talked about on last episode of how important wing depth is. That, like, not to devalue centers, because, again, I'm a Sixers fan. I love Joel Embiid. I don't think the Sixers would be – they'd be a borderline playoff team without him, in my opinion. But, again, there's so few Embiids or Jokic's or even Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert. I know he isn't what he was in Utah quite yet, but I think that goes back to wings are so important, guards are so important, but centers are starting to be devalued a little bit. And maybe that does end up affecting Naz Reid's market this summer. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I would say that, like, it takes the right center to be valuable. Either you're like a Jokic or a Embiid, or you're one of those guys like Evan Mobley that he moves like a guard.
Yeah, or
guard
Jaren
1 through
Jackson,
5.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like those guys, they're always going to have value, but we're moving away a little bit from like the Mason Plumlees of the world being like legit guys that you want to go out and get.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this concludes, part 1 of, again, 4 mini episodes we're going to combine into one for the mock trade deadline. This is part 2, episode number 2 of the mock trade deadline preview and series. Mm-hmm. Anything that Logan will be doing, you guys will be able to find on the site by the end of this week on SportsEthos.com. You will see what every participant is doing, what we're all negotiating. I'm going to make sure to update that as much as possible. So yeah, Logan, where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm basically just on Twitter now at LAltonNBA. I may eventually dust off the writing.
There we go.
But we'll see.
Okay. Well, yeah, if you definitely do, obviously we are looking forward to that, and we'll make sure that we spread that because, as I said in the Discord a few days ago, I'm indebted to all of you for being willing to participate in this exercise and helping me make it what it was. And obviously, Corbin, you know that extends to you as well, and every other participant we're going to be having on. So, okay, we will be having Josh Earl on, who is representing the Utah Jazz in part 2 of the segment. So we will be getting right into that momentarily. Logan, again, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, man. Definitely.
Thank you. Next up, we now have our resident Utah Jazz participant GM. His name is Josh Earl. You can follow him on Twitter at 2RedJEarl. That's the number 2, RED, like the color, JURL, like the website.
Yep.
So Corbin and I are with Josh. Josh was one of the few participants that kind of got to handpick his team that he wanted to be, because we didn't have a Jazz beat writer or reporter or anybody lined up, and out of the remaining teams, Josh kind of wanted them. So I suppose my first question is, why Utah? What out of all the teams that, well, I mean, Corbin got Milwaukee, or Corbin got Brooklyn, Woj Tech got Milwaukee, Sacramento was available. There were some intriguing teams. So
yes.
Why did you want to go with Utah?
Because I just thought Utah was in such a unique position. Like they're already exceeding expectations. They already have a surplus of picks. So they're already in a position right now where they can buy, they can sell, they can do absolutely nothing, and they're still on track for like their long-term plan. So I found that really intriguing, especially in a kind of simulation like this, where I don't have to do anything, but I can be aggressive if I want to be. I can kind of sell or I can buy. It just presented the most intriguing set of options to me.
So Josh has been just about, and Corbin, you'd probably agree with this, just about the most active participant so far in this exercise. Obviously, I'm in every negotiation, so I really know who's participating the most, but Josh has completed 4 trades already. So I would be surprised if Utah ended up at the actual deadline making that amount of trades. But again, the whole point of this exercise is to see realistically what could happen at the deadline, not what will happen, because what will happen is obviously impossible to predict. But I think Josh has done a phenomenal job of really honing in on what could happen. So Josh, before we get into the 4 trades that you did make.
Mhm.
Corbin, you have no knowledge of this because I haven't shared it with you yet.
Oh,
I
okay.
want to talk about a negotiation that a trade offer that Josh presented that really didn't gain any traction. And it was your offer for OG Anunoby to Toronto.
Yes.
You got shut down in 4
Expectedly.
minutes. 4 minutes.
Yeah.
And then immediately you responded, would an extra first-round pick matter? 2 minutes after that, no.
Yeah.
So it took a combined 6 minutes for your offer of Jared Vanderbilt, Kelly Olynyk, Malik Beasley, 2 unprotected first, an additional first, regardless of what you're going to offer, and Utah's 2023 top 5 protected first. So you were giving a 4 first, 2 of them unprotected, 1 top 5 protected, and Jared Vanderbilt and another first, and Kelly Olynyk and Malik Beasley for OG. And I don't know if I want to say rightfully so, as didn't entertain it. I'm going to ask him about it next week when he comes on for Toronto. But he has no desire to move OG Anunoby. So,
yeah, I've kind of figured that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of see how flexible he was on OG, because I do think OG and Markkanen together would be a very fun combo. They fit the same timeline. I think that could be really interesting. And I honestly think OG might be one of, if not the best perimeter defenders in the league. And having him along with like Kessler on the back line, like I think it could help Utah develop, a defensive edge that will help that rebuild go quicker. Like I said, I didn't really expect him to accept anything anyway, but you got to shoot your shot.
Yeah, and I believe it was Zach Lowe in the Low Post who was saying that, don't be surprised if OG Anunoby goes for a Donovan Mitchell type return.
Yep.
I think it's going to be closer to the DeJounte Murray return.
Yeah.
The main value, but
yeah,
you offer more than just about both of them, and it was still shot down. So, but I do think in real life, if Anunoby is moved, which I think he could be, because guys usually have more trade value when there's an extra year on their deal than when they're on expiring. So if there's a time to move Anunoby, at the time to move Siakam, it would be now for Toronto.
Yes.
So let's get into the trades you did make. We already talked with Logan previously, so the listeners already know the Naz Reid and a 2023 Knicks seconds for the first round pick that's the least favorable between Brooklyn, the Sixers, whatever it is. You basically are moving down 20 spots in the draft to get Naz Reid, who's an expiring.
Yeah.
So what's the rationale?
Well, one, we think Naz hasn't really had the opportunity yet to really show what he can do in his starts. He's had, I think he's averaged like 21 and 11 on like 61% shooting. So like the guy can play, and he fits the same timeline that we're looking to establish around Markkanen and Sexton and like Vanderbilt and stuff. And just feels like he would have a greater opportunity here. And I think he would fit in with what Hardy's trying to do as a coach. And really that particular first that we sent is likely going to be mid to late 20s. So it's not even going to be like a significant first. We already have some 2023 draft capital earlier in the draft. So like we felt that the bird in the hand that is Naz Reid is better than, whatever we might find in the bush at like 27th.
Yeah. So
that's fair. I'm actually, it's funny you mentioned that as far as Naz Reid kind of getting more opportunity in Utah, not being, I don't want to say a distressed asset, but someone that hasn't had that chance to flourish in Minnesota. Because Logan did mention, like, hey, he was trying to make this realistically, and he said, like, I would love to keep Naz Reid, but let's face it, he's behind Gobert, he's behind Cat. He's barely getting that time. Why would he want to stay past this contract anyway when there's other teams, and I brought up Dallas, or Utah's obviously another one, that would have an opportunity to give him more of a featured role, or give him really more of a standard role than the one he's getting right now as a, third big. So that's definitely interesting you say that. I guess kind of having had the luxury of talking to you for a couple of years now and knowing your approach to team building, or some of it, we talk about this quite often. When you saw this Utah Jazz team and you were looking at who they had in terms of competing players, where they are in the standings, when did you immediately go with the idea, okay, like we have a chance here to acquire some draft capital, some younger players that haven't been able to shine and really continue this rebuild? Were you thinking that as you went along with the negotiations, like, hey, we could actually go this direction? Like, when did you decide upon the direction that you went with? Because I mean, for me, like, I'm still figuring out as someone negotiating the team.
Yeah. Well, I came into this with two targets. One was OG, and I knew I was going to get shot down on that one, but I was like, I'm going to shoot my shot anyway. Kobe. But the other one was Dyson Daniels, and I was going really hard for Dyson Daniels, but they preferred a different trade package for him. And so I just kind of wanted to identify ways I can upgrade without necessarily, sacrificing too much in the near future while also, enhancing the next couple of seasons. And like Naz Reid is what I call a basketball orphan. Like he's kind of like it's not the same front office that drafted him. Like he doesn't really have the favor of anybody who has power right now in Utah. Or in Minnesota. He does now in Utah. But and so I just thought he would put up more production and he would be a more impactful player for us than he would on Minnesota. And I only dropped back, like Steven said, like 20, 24 picks, and I already have draft capital in the first of the 2023 draft. So it seemed like a no-brainer to me. And then some of the other options that came available, like I picked up another first, which we'll get into. I picked up a couple of veterans, and I swapped out one of my youngest guys for a guy who's more in line age-wise with like marketing and stuff. And they were all just kind of moves that I felt fit what I was trying to do just as a team, and wouldn't, like, we're probably gonna at best hover around that play in anyway. So like, I don't think it'll harm my chances of getting at least some play in money, but I think it'll help us get set up better long term, both financially and kind of going forward player wise.
I like it for sure.
Let's move on to the next trade. And that was you swapping Ochai Agbaji, who just got in the Donovan Mitchell trade. Obviously, he was just 14th pick in the draft, came over from Cleveland in the Mitchell trade.
Mm-hmm.
You traded him to Indiana for Chris Duarte.
Yes.
Obviously, Duarte made all-rookie second team last year. Mm-hmm. He is older. He's already 25 years old, given he was a super senior last year.
Yep.
But Agbaji isn't spring chicken either, for lack of a better term. He was a multiple-year guy at Kansas. And you just said that, he kind of fits the market and timeline better. So why Duarte over Agbaji?
I feel like Duarte is a more productive, impactful player right now and in the next season or two. And I think our rebuild is not going to take as long as some other rebuilds necessarily, at least to getting back into playoffs and, having some degree of competitiveness, maybe not contention, but, playoff competitiveness. And I just felt like Okay is not quite ready. Like, he's had a couple of good games, but I feel like it's going to take a while before he becomes an actual consistent, impactful rotation player for me, whereas Duarte can do that right now.
Mm-hmm. And Duarte's not getting much time in Indiana.
Yeah, exactly. He's another kind of distressed asset who I think can soak up the backup wing minutes in Utah, have a cleaner, more consistent role, and hopefully get back to more of that rookie performance.
Yeah, and my goal is to get Mark Schindler, who is representing the Pacers in this exercise, to come on and give us the other aspect of it, because it's pretty rare. I know they were both, Duarte was 13th pick in the draft last year, and Agbaji was 14th this year.
Yeah.
But it's rare to see a guy usually traded off an all-rookie performance just for another similar type guy.
Yeah.
The next trade you have, trade number 3, you traded Garrett Temple, Jackson Hayes, and
I got those.
oh no,
guys.
you got okay, yeah. I was
Yeah.
gonna say I know you got and a 2024 first round pick.
Yeah.
More favorable Milwaukee and the Pelicans. So again, late first, which is what you already traded. So you keep that late first.
And I think I had very little 2024 draft capital beforehand. So it was a way to kind of add a pick in
Recoup
that
some of that
particular
value.
draft
the next
for
year.
a guy where and I sent out Kelly Olynyk, who I think is going to be fantastic for the Pelicans. I think that's
agree.
a great deal for
Shooting
them
big
as
next
well.
to Zion.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It gives them a lot more flexibility, especially when they have injuries to any of their front court players. It gives them a little more
That
kind
floor
of
spacing component.
Yeah. They can mix and match their front court a lot now. So I think it was a great trade for them. This was spun off of my attempt to get Dyson Daniels. And then like Garrett Temple is a super quality veteran. Everyone loves Garrett Temple. He's not that expensive. He'd be a good like veteran locker room mentor for my younger guys. And then Jackson Hayes was the only way the salary would work.
And we're going to get into that because you initially said that after you got Jackson Hayes, you're like, oh, yeah, I don't want him, the domestic violence, everything like that.
I was going to waive him. Yeah.
I understand that sediments in the aspect of, the Jazz are clearly building a culture. You don't want that type of guy.
High character people.
Yeah. So anyway, I told you, hold off.
Yeah.
Jackson Hayes' mid-tier salary could be used in another deal.
Yes. I was.
Shockingly, the front office guy was right.
Yeah, no, you had a good point.
So then this is the last trade we see.
For now.
You receive for now, yep. You receive Chris Boucher, who kind of replaces Kelly Olynyk, except he can protect the rim better.
Exactly. Yep.
And Otto Porter Jr., who's obviously out for the year, but he has a player option, so he could either
and also championship experience.
Exactly.
Veteran
for
presence.
Jackson Hayes, and again, just for listeners at home, these trades couldn't be but these were two separate trades because Jackson Hayes couldn't be aggregated since he was just acquired. So it was basically Jackson Hayes for Otto Porter and then Chris Boucher for Malik Beasley, essentially. Yep. And so you have Boucher kind of replacing that Olynyk role, except he could protect the rim a bit better. Then you're bringing in Otto Porter for the veteran mentorship for at least the end of the year.
Yep.
Maybe he opts into the player option, you have it next year. But you got off Jackson Hayes, who you didn't even want in your locker room anyway. And Malik Beasley. Interesting, because I do like Malik Beasley, and he's a guy who has been discussed in John Collins negotiations because the Jazz want him. So what do you think this was fair value, Boucher for Malik Beasley, essentially? Or what was the rationale behind that?
So Beasley has some other off-court stuff that I'm not a huge fan of culturally. But the other thing, you got to give up some value to get some value. And I think Boucher provides, not to the same degree as Olynyk, but provides some spacing. I can play him alongside Kessler. I can play him alongside Vanderbilt and be fairly okay offensively and defensively. I think he just adds, again, I kind of came into this wanting to create a little bit more of a defensive identity, at least within the rotation. And I think, Naz Reid and Boucher should help with that. And Duarte is a solid defender when he's healthy. I like the idea of Malik Beasley going to Toronto too, because if they do trade Gary Trent Jr., Malik Beasley can step right into minutes and help provide some 3-point shooting that they kind of really seriously need. But honestly, I just don't. While I like John Collins a lot as a player, I don't like him for what I would be trying to do if I were the Jazz. And I don't particularly like that fit with Markkanen, Vanderbilt, and then Kessler and Naz Reid. So I pivoted and thought, Boucher would be a nice fit. And it wasn't until after this, and I have another pending trade that I realized I grew up in Eugene, Oregon. I grew up near the U of O campus. It's very familiar to me, and I didn't even realize I acquired 2 Ducks.
Oregon guys. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, and one of my pending trades might include another one. None of that was intentional, but subconscious, man. It's power.
There it is. There it is.
Okay. Gary Trent Jr. was moved. I know we're going to have Ez to come on and talk about that, but I know you just mentioned, if they do trade Gary Trent, then they have Malik Beasley. So that kind of gives some insight into Toronto's rationale. But 2 more quick things. Do you want me to spoil the trade you're trying to get done for the 3rd Oregon Duck? Or...
I mean, maybe if it'll grease the wheels. And I've been waiting for a response for a couple of days. I think it was probably a beyond fair offer, but we'll see.
Okay. Well, Josh is trying to get Peyton Pritchard from the Celtics for it was some type of protected.
It was a lotto protected 2025 first. Because I have 3 2025 first. So
what's the rationale behind that? I mean, you must be hiring Pritchard to offer.
So Mike Conley is literally the only point guard on my roster.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Clarkson, Colin Sexton can bring the ball up,
but
I wouldn't call them.
Yeah,
they're not facilitators. Nikhil Alexander-Walker should not be a like a.
He doesn't know he's supposed to be a facilitator.
That's
yeah,
my
exactly.
Guy, but, yeah.
So, given the kind of offense that Hardy is trying to implement, I felt like Pritchard was the most available young point guard who kind of fits that timeline. He's actually a really good shooter, could fit really well within that offensive system. And I think, could glean some knowledge from Conley. And I think he would just fit right in, and he played with Duarte. Like, I think they could have a nice little bench chemistry. And honestly, there aren't a whole lot of point guards available that could potentially salary match and aren't atrocious from 3 or have some other deficiency that wouldn't really make them fit with what I was trying to do.
And from a real life perspective, Will Holiday obviously coached Peyton Pritchard last year. Danny Ainge drafted Peyton Pritchard.
Yep.
So just from a real life standpoint, I do think that's a good target for Utah.
The ties are real there for sure.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, he fits well. And let's be real, he just got freed off of Boston's bench with the last stretch of games. So it's not like he was actually actively being used for the greater part of the season for Boston anyway. So that is something to be sure. And once Jaylen Brown gets back, his minutes are more than likely going to be reduced anyway. So definitely agree with you there. My last question was, and I kind of feel like we already know the answer, but as much as I love a good trade, I'm just really big on the ones that almost happened, but just didn't make it. So I want to give you a chance to kind of not even vent, but just share your thoughts on the one trade you were trying to do. I do, that fell through. And I guess this is the twist. Why do you think your offer wasn't as even? Do you think it was just a matter of the assets that the other team wanted that were better? Do you think you don't know? You're like, hey, I don't understand why that wasn't done. Is that still something that sticks in your craw?
No, I'm legit still a little peeved about it, but
and this is for the record the Dyson Daniels pursuit, right?
Yeah. So I'm just gonna lay it out there. I approached New Orleans, and I offered a combo of Kelly Olynyk and one of Jordan Clarkson or Malik Beasley, and I think Leandro Bolmaro or Simone Fontecchio for salary matching purposes for basically all their bad contracts who are out of the rotation. So Devontae Graham, Jackson Hayes, Garrett Temple, you notice I got 2 of them, and Dyson Daniels. I asked for no draft capital. I basically was trying to gift wrap them like a strong 10-man playoff rotation. And they were like, I just want Kelly Olynyk. And I was like, okay, fair enough. I respect that. Dyson's a really interesting player. That's why I was going for him. I could see why you want to keep him. And then the actual trade dropped the next day. And honestly, it's just because that GM prefers, for whatever reason. Personally, I think my offer was better for a variety of reasons. But
of course,
what matters is what that GM thinks. And they believe that Fred VanVleet is the guy who's going to help them get to where they're trying to go. And I know that trade has gotten a little heat, both in our
I've gotten
Discord channel and on Twitter.
thousands of mentions on Twitter.
Yes.
I'm getting borderline death threats over this.
Oh
trade.
no!
Like
I saw you have to note
there's
that,
a
like,
bounty out for me from the city
Yeah.
of New Orleans for assembling this group of people, and one of them would put Dyson Daniels in a Fed. But we're having a Neil Long literally in 2 minutes right after this, so you guys will hear it.
And
his rationale, but.
I love him, yo. I'm very curious to hear this.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I love the
I
guy,
did a
but
trade
what
to
is he
reveal his
thinking?
identity. Everyone's like,
Yeah.
who is it? We need to know who did this trade. He's such an idiot. And I was going to release the the chart that I have of
handles and
every
stuff.
participant. I'm like, I'm
Take some
like,
heat off you. I'd have done it.
yeah, so but I'm holding
I'm
off.
sorry.
But yeah,
Josh
we're
is
having a
crazy
Neil Long
out
after
there.
this, so everyone will know shortly anyway.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
man.
But you know, like, I can kind of get the rationale for him if he does believe that Fred VanVleet is kind of that additional piece that helps them the most. They wouldn't be able to sign him in free agency, so making a trade to acquire him would give them bird rights. Like, I get it.
The age-old GM.
My heart
small
doesn't
market.
get it yet. I still think Dyson Daniels would be just everyone, and I'll leave it on this. Just everyone picture Dyson Daniels mentored by Mike Conley and covering up for all the stuff that Sexton has trouble with. And then you have Daniels and Sexton in the backcourt long term. That might be the ideal partner for Sexton if you do want to build around Sexton, which I can take it or leave it. But so that's where I'm coming from. I believe all the GMs are doing what they believe is best for their own teams, and everybody's been really kind of very kind and very forthcoming in all the negotiations. It's been a great experience. That's life. You don't always get what you want, but sometimes you get what you need. Hopefully I get what I need. And, you know, I the other thing with these 4 trades so far, I've also saved Ryan Smith $4.7 million.
Yes, you have.
There you go. So you got the bottom line down pat, my friend. You do what you can.
And we have the same amount of draft picks now. I just basically shifted one from this year to 2024, which we didn't have. You know, and we have some younger players. Naz Reid's going to start for us. So, yeah.
You did well, all things considered, Josh. I think you've had a very successful mock trade deadline so far. I wish you continued success moving forward. You know, listen, I'll take one of your prime assets for Royce O'Neal, make a reunion happen. It's okay.
That would be so funny to just like swap Royce back. But...
Just do a friend swap. Where's
Royce
Billy King
O'Neal would
when you
fit
need
well
him?
on this Jazz team. By the
Oh
way.
yeah, no, he would. Yeah.
And all I want is a primo young asset, Colin Sexton. Let's get it. No, but anyways,
We'll talk, buddy. We'll talk.
We will. Let's do it. But always fun, Josh.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Josh, again, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for participating. As I said to Logan, I'm forever indebted to all 29 of you, and I hope you guys hold that against me because I've been reiterating it so much for, participating in this exercise and making it what it is and what it's going to become even further. So, as we said, you can follow Josh on Twitter at 2red, like the color, J, like the letter, URL, like the website.
Yep.
So, if you guys have any questions, tweet at me at BirdRightsPod, tweet at Corbin NBA, tweet at Josh, anything you guys need to know. We'll be happy to answer. We will be having O'Neal Gagner on next to be talking about his role as a Pelicans GM and why he traded Dyson Daniels in a trade for Fred VanVleet and why I'm sleeping with one eye open because of it. So, you guys will be hearing that momentarily. Josh, thank you so much for coming on, and we will talk to you guys in a couple minutes. Okay, we are here with the man of the hour of this podcast. Again, I'm grateful for all guests for coming on and participating, and not only participating in the exercise, but taking the time to come on the podcast. But this is the man that everyone wants to hear from. It is the fictitious GM in this exercise of the New Orleans Pelicans. He is the director of strategy and cap specialist for Thread Sports Marketing and the co-founder of No Trade Clause. It is Anil Gagna, You can follow him on Twitter at Anil Gagna NBA. That's ANILGOGNA NBA. So Anil, we talked about this a little bit previously when we had Josh on, but there's a bet. I'm New Orleans Most Wanted for running this exercise where Dyson Daniels got traded to the Toronto Raptors. So I'm going to pull up the full trade right here, but overall, what do you think what was your rationale behind giving up a piece like Dyson Daniels? In addition, it was 2 first-round picks, Dyson Daniels, and then what was it, Devontae Graham?
Yeah, it was Fred VanVleet, Delano Banton, and 2029 second-round pick for Dyson Daniels, Najee Marshall, Devontae Graham, Willie Hernan Gomez. 2 first-round picks. One is the 2026 first from the Milwaukee and New Orleans. It's one of the better of the 2. And then the 2024, not this year's, next year's first-round pick from the Lakers, which is top 5 protected, which extinguishes if it's in the top 5. And then the Chicago 2024 second-round pick. So it sounds like a lot. Sounds like a lot of different assets. There's a couple of different ways to split this up and to break this down. So the first thing I want to do is explain the value that we see in Fred VanVleet, okay? So there's a couple of priorities that we went in with being New Orleans. And I want to just ask everyone to just keep an open mind about this, because obviously when you look at the trade, you're like, whoa, that's a lot. It is a lot, okay? First things first, the first priority for New Orleans is staying under the luxury tax this year. New Orleans Pelicans franchise has never paid the luxury tax in their history. They will probably be paying the luxury tax starting next year, which is the first year that Zion's extension kicks in. But they don't want to go over the tax this season. Okay, so that was our first priority. Second priority, getting a big man that we think could space the floor. That's why we did the trade with Kelly Olynyk. Fine. The second or the last priority was, if we can get a veteran point guard who can be a leader and help facilitate the offense, we wanted that. We have no player on the roster that averages even 6 assists per game. We have CJ McCollum, that you could argue is maybe he's a natural shooting guard. When we looked at the available point guards, we see Fred VanVleet. And I'm talking removing like playoff teams contenders. So you got Fred VanVleet, LaMelo Ball, he's not really available. Lonzo Ball, he's hurt. Westbrook, Kyle Lowry, Mike Conley, D'Angelo Russell, Monte Morris, Markelle Fultz, Kevin Porter Jr. Some of those guys are not really going to be available. Some of those guys aren't what you would classify as a leader, ready to lead a team that's going into championship contention. Okay. So now when we look at Fred VanVleet, we thought he was the best of the available point guards. And for me, in my opinion, Fred VanVleet is not a good defender. He's an elite defender, despite his size, 6'1", 200 pounds. Just to give you an example of why I think he's an elite defender. Last year in a game against Minnesota, he forced 11 turnovers in one game. 2 days later versus Orlando Magic, he forced 9 turnovers. Fine, small sample size. Good defense, small sample size, right? If you don't agree with me, why don't you take a look at the votes for all defense last year? Yeah. Last year, Fred VanVleet was just shy of making the second team all defense. He was 1 spot away from making the team. He had 2 votes for first team, 37 votes for second team, total of 41 points. He had more points than Draymond Green for making the all defensive team. Draymond Green made the team, but based on position, you can only have so many guards. So if it was positionless, Fred VanVleet was good enough to have been second team all defense. So from my opinion, Fred VanVleet is an elite defender. Okay. Now, let's look at the trade. The second point here is, let's look at the trade differently. Now, if I told you that the trade was, instead of everything that I had mentioned, which was, Dyson and Najee and Devontae Graham and Willie Hernan Gomez, 2 first-round picks and a second. If the trade was just Dyson Daniels, Najee Marshall, and 1 first-round pick for Fred VanVleet, I think that would be easier for people to digest. Not another pick, not another second, maybe some of the other pieces. The thing is, that is the core of this trade. The core of this trade is Fred VanVleet for Dyson Daniels, Najee Marshall, and 1 first-round pick. The reason it looks like it's so much is because there's multiple trades that are combined in one. First of all, Devontae Graham. Getting off of his contract was a huge priority. That alone costs a first-round pick. Devontae Graham is costing $12.1 million next season. Do you guys know what that will cost the New Orleans Pelicans if they're only over the luxury tax just by Devontae Graham's salary?
I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I could calculate it. But
I'm not going to calculate it.
It's going to cost the franchise about $34 million just next season to keep Devontae Graham on the roster if they're only over the luxury tax by Devontae Graham's salary. $34 million. I'm pretty sure they will want to get rid of that salary if they're going to be over the luxury tax. And the further they're into the luxury tax, the higher that number is going to go up because it escalates. Okay, so one of those first-round picks was just getting rid of Devontae Graham. Then there was a second-round pick. The second-round pick is a wash. We're giving away a second-round pick. We're getting back a second-round pick. Okay, so now it comes down to Dyson Daniels, Najee Marshall, and 1 first-round pick. First of all, that first-round pick from the Lakers, it's top 5 protected. And if it doesn't convey, it's going to extinguish. Well, next season, the Lakers, who own that, it's their pick, on their cap sheet, they basically just have LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and that's it. They're going to be able to completely rebuild that team. So if you think that they're not going to be a playoff team, that's your perspective. From my perspective, they're going to be a playoff team, considering they're going to be able to rebuild that roster. Westbrook's money is off the team. They still have their draft picks. You think that LeBron James is going to sign that extension to not be a playoff team again next year? That pick is not going to be a lottery pick next season. That's how I'm viewing it. If you think differently, so be it. Now, the next thing here is Najee Marshall, Dyson Daniels. Najee Marshall, next year there's a team option for him at $1.9 million. But if New Orleans actually wants to retain him, they're most likely going to decline that team option. He'll be restricted this offseason, and they're going to have to pay him a significant increase. Is that something they want to do if they're a tax team? Maybe not. Najee Marshall can be argued. Maybe he's their 7th, 8th, 9th best player. So that's up for debate. Now it comes down to Dyson Daniels. So Dyson Daniels, what people are getting frustrated about, or they're getting all worked up about, is the potential. Dyson Daniels, he was a first-round pick. He's only 19 years old. There's so much potential. Do you guys know how many number 8 picks in the last 30 years made an all-star team? The last 30 years. What do you guys think?
Specifically number 8 picks?
Yeah, specifically number 8 pick.
I'm just going to throw a shot in the dark and say 4.
I'm going to say 3. I remember 2 offhand, but I don't remember TJ Ford making one.
The answer is 1. There's 1 number 8 pick that made an all-star team in their career, and it was in 1993. It was Vin Baker.
Vin Baker with the yeah. Wow. Okay.
There are currently 63 active players in the NBA that have been all-stars. 29 of them are guards. Okay. Of those, only 3 active players averaged under 5 points per game in their first season and later became all-stars. I say this because Dyson Daniels is averaging under 5 points per game, and he's playing about 19 minutes a game. So sure, you think, he's going to be incredible. Only 3 players went on to become all-stars. They're Goran Dragic, DeJounte Murray, and guess who? Fred VanVleet. Wow. Okay, that's it. Now let's expand it and say, what about all guards who average under 10 points per game? Okay, do you know that would make it 8 players that went on to become all-stars, and the average time it took them to become all-stars, 7 seasons. If it took Dyson Daniels 7 seasons to become an all-star, he would be 26 years old. You would miss this current window. CJ McCollum, he'd be 37, 38 years old. Even if you look at Dyson Daniels per 36-minute stats, They are by far the worst of every player that has gone on to become an all-star. His per 36-minute stats, he's averaging 8.3 points per game. The next lowest of anyone else that went on to become an all-star was 12 points per game. So in my head, we're weighing the potential of Dyson Daniels. And we've seen potential many times not amount. So sure, Dyson Daniels, 19 years old, really good. He might go on to become an all-star. Maybe it takes him what the average is, which is 7 seasons. Guess what? We don't want to wait that long. Instead, we'd like a guy maybe who was an all-star last season, who was almost all NBA defense last season. Sure, Fred's having a little bit of a down start to the season. We're talking 30 games, okay? 30 games. We know that the Raptors' chemistry is not what it normally is. That team is off. So we're going to kind of go in buy low. Now, the other way I want you guys to look at this trade is compare it to another trade that most people think was a really good trade a really good trade. The Milwaukee Bucks, when they traded for Drew Holiday. Do you guys think that was a good trade or a bad trade?
At the time, I remember going on my old podcast, the NBA Goal, and basically saying, this might go down as the biggest overpay in NBA history. It was desperate by Milwaukee. It was a desperate attempt to keep Giannis in town. But you know what? They won a championship.
And he's still in town.
It worked out. And
exactly.
So I think I get the point that Neil's trying to make is, if the Pelicans win a championship, nobody's going to remember that they traded Dyson Daniels for VanVleet.
Exactly. Now, let me just break down what that trade was quickly, okay? Because I want to compare the two. The summary of that trade is, yes, they were adding a final piece. It was a slight overpay. So first of all, Milwaukee traded for Drew Holiday. He was on an expiring deal. Same with Fred VanVleet. It wasn't like he had a long like contract that they were trading for. He was in the final season. There was no assurance of an extension. They signed the extension with Drew Holiday 5 months after they traded for him. Drew Holiday at the time that they traded for him was 30 years old. Fred VanVleet is actually 2 years younger. He's 28. Drew Holiday was a one-time All-Star when they traded for him. And that season that he was an All-Star was 8 years earlier. Fred also is a one-time All-Star, but it was last year, not 8 years ago. Now, what did Milwaukee give up when they acquired Drew Holiday? A 2025 first, a 2027 first. That's 2 firsts. They also gave up RJ Hampton, who was a 19-year-old rookie point guard that was a first-round pick. Sounds similar to Dyson Daniels. Fine, you know what RJ Hampton became, so you can easily, Dyson is not RJ Hampton. Fine, but I'm just telling you, he was a 19-year-old rookie point guard drafted the first round. Also in that trade, Milwaukee gave up George Hill. Also in that trade, Milwaukee gave up Eric Bledsoe. Now, when you compare those two trades, this trade doesn't seem that crazy. So, in my opinion, we need to look at things in a different perspective. When it's just stacked up all against it, like, oh my God, it was this and this and this and this. Split the trade up. Look at it differently. Take the bias out. That's my rationale for the trade.
Wow.
I'm convinced. Corbin, what about you?
Listen, I am too. I'm convinced. I still have a question, but I'm convinced as well because that was a really thorough breakdown. And thank you for giving us that. Listen,
I appreciate you putting the time into this exercise for us.
Seriously. I guess my question is, when you look at it, how, especially as someone who evaluates deals, you project with salary caps and, roster spots, like this is what you do. When it comes to an exercise like this, with your experience, given what you kind of bring to the table there, how easy or difficult is it for you to look at a trade from the thorough kind of analysis that you gave it at the end of it with what it looks like on its face? Because so many people, you get, and a lot of it's reactionary media, all of that, like, wow, judge the deal, boom. And they don't take the time to really give it that context necessary. So when you are approaching this deal in terms of evaluation, in terms of proposing it, how are you looking at it in terms of, okay, this looks crazy, but hear me out? Or are you someone who walks your way into it going, okay, we're in this position, we need to duck the salary cap, which players fit that need that can give us that additional short-term boost? I want to get your thought process in manufacturing it in real time because you gave an excellent breakdown of what it looks like as a result.
Yeah, so in real time, I went in and basically said, what do I think New Orleans needs? Now, a lot of people, to be honest, a lot of people might think New Orleans doesn't really need anything, and that might be the right approach. And we're in this exercise. If I just said, hey, listen, like I think New Orleans is decent, I'm gonna do nothing, absolutely nothing. Yeah, sure, that's one way of approaching it, but I thought let's have fun with it and see what if New Orleans was going to do something. What would they do? Well, I think that they're more likely to say, let's go all in and see if we can win this thing. And so when you look at, well, what would they want to get? And you look at the available point guards, and I listed them out, there isn't a lot that's better than Fred VanVleet. And now what you're actually seeing is articles are starting to come out. I saw 2 articles in the last 24 hours about Fred VanVleet. Where could he go? New Orleans Pelicans looks like a good destination. So that connection isn't that preposterous. Bodog has it on their betting odds as a potential landing destination for Fred VanVleet is the New Orleans Pelicans. There's another site, Rapture, that I sent to Steven the other day. They had a proposed trade that was worse the trade that I put here. They were including Dyson Daniels, 2 first-round picks, and also Trey Murphy. So what I'm looking at, first of all, is, yeah, exactly. What I'm looking at here is who else is available? Let's just say I don't get Fred VanVleet. Am I looking for Westbrook, Mike Conley, D'Angelo Russell? Like, no, I don't really think I want those players. I probably would prefer to slightly overpay. Now, keep in mind, New Orleans has a lot of assets. Let's just say they overpaid this trade by 1 first-round pick, which was the New Orleans / Milwaukee first-round pick. Okay, what do you think that pick is going to be, between 20 and 30? So if that was the overpay, 1 first-round pick that's going to be somewhere between 20 and 30, fine. Crucify me. Kill me, because that was the overpay to go all in, get a player that was borderline all defense, that was an all-star last year. You know what? Yeah, I think that's worth it. And the season that Milwaukee, when they made that trade to get Jrue Holiday, the season before, they weren't in the finals. They weren't even in the conference finals. They had won 1 game in the second round. They lost to Miami 4-1. That was the season they were coming off of. So, like, there's a certain time when teams need to figure out, okay, are we going to push our chips in? Are we not going to push our chips in? When I look at the position that New Orleans is in, I was like, it makes sense. You have tons of assets. At some point, you're going to need to cash these assets in, or you sit on them and you wait and you wait. And some of these players, they just don't hit that potential. So you can wait, but not everyone's going to hit that potential. So you got to make a judgment call. You can look at Golden State right now and think, man, maybe they should have traded Wiseman 2 years ago. Because right now, what you're going to get for Wiseman is not the same. But 2 years ago, people would have said, Golden State's crazy if they trade Wiseman. Look at all that potential. Yeah. You'll get killed if you always keep chasing potential.
Wow. I love it. I'm sold.
I'm
there.
I'm the lawyer in this chat, and he made a solid argument. So
case closed.
Exactly. And one last thing before you go. I know we already talked about the Kelly Olynyk swap with Josh because he was Utah. So just give us, 30, 45 seconds. Is it just really you wanted the shooting next to Zion? You gave up a 2024 first-round pick, the more favorable of Milwaukee and the Pelicans, with Garrett Temple and Jackson Hayes. I know that's just expiring salary filler for Kelly Olynyk. So what's your rationale?
Yes. So the 2 players, not rotation players, just salary filler. Again, after this exercise, I'm within a few $100,000 of the luxury tax. So I knew I needed to get rid of them later. So it's basically a first-round pick, which is Milwaukee or New Orleans 2024 first-round pick, which I project to be not a great first-round pick for Kelly Olynyk. What I like about Kelly Olynyk, he's the 20th best three-point shooter this season. I like him being able to spread the floor, gives us a different look on offense. He's 1.5 years removed from averaging 19 points a game, 8.5 rebounds, 4 assists a game when he played with Houston in 2020, 2021. So yeah, I just think Kelly Olynyk smart player, fantastic shooter. I like that we can switch it up. Jonas is a nice threat inside. Kelly can be a nice threat outside. Just gives us some options. So that was what I thought with Kelly Olynyk. There was a couple other, available options, but I like Kelly Olynyk as for what we got.
Yeah, I think is a nice match as well. A versatile big. You kind of recreate, to a lesser extent than Nikola Mirotic, kind of balances you out with AD in terms of that guy who can bring some veteran leadership, but also open up the floor. A lot of pick and pop. I like the balance there for sure. And I mean, what didn't cost a whole lot either. And you're right, as a contending team, I mean, you've really kind of shored up some positions of weakness for this Pelican squad, save some money in the process. I mean, yeah, on his face, you're like, whoa, knee-jerk reaction is what just happened. But when you really delve into it, like you brought out, it makes a lot of sense, and I think the team is better built for it.
Yeah. The only other concern I would have, and again, I don't want to spend, we already took enough time. I don't want this podcast being over 2 hours, but I'm interested to see how, one, if Van Vliet would even re-sign with New Orleans, if, an actual trade came to fruition. That's, impossible for any of us to predict, really. Maybe, obviously, in this exercise, we don't have those handshake agreements with the players' agents that transpire in real life. So we don't know. And I'm interested to see how the small backcourt of Van Vliet and McCollum would, transpire. I know Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland's working out okay because they have Evan Mobley and Jared Allen in their back line. The Pelicans, sure, Van Vliet's a better defender than any of those guys by a significant margin, but he doesn't really have, those type of guys behind him to make up for either a CJ McCollum mistake or just having two small guards in general off the court at the same time. Do either of you have anything to add?
I have one last thing. Oh, sorry. Well, actually, I'm going to let the guests of honor go first, obviously.
No, it's a fair point that you made about Fred VanVleet's fit, whether he signs an extension. Obviously, if that was an available option in this exercise, we would have figured out, is he going to sign an extension or not? When we looked at the teams that have cap space, really the only playoff contending threat that has a lot of money available was the Lakers. And I just think that they're going to go big whale hunting. I don't think that, they're going to spend the majority of their money chasing a Fred VanVleet. I think that they're probably going to go look for a third superstar caliber player. So we felt like, under the parameters of this exercise, we're willing to take that risk.
Definitely. I guess my response, I think that I like in terms of, I think that he would probably re-sign. Of course, the money right, and you already made that agreement. I guess my last question is, next to last question is, was there a thought of the potential long-term fit between your backcourt now being, I mean, offensively, definitely like it. Both guys can play on ball, both guys can play off, but being undersized, for their respective positions, I guess, being a little bit older. I mean, Fred VanVleet's still in his 20s, but not a young guy by any stretch. I think he's age 28 season right now. And if you're locking him long-term and you already have CJ locked up long-term, then you have to balance that. What was the thought given to that and the rationale that this would work despite the issues that might occur because of that?
Yeah, I just think that if Fred VanVleet is your fourth best player behind Zion, CJ, Brandon Ingram, you're asking him to do a lot less. He is a solid defender individually. The average size of the point guard in the NBA is between 6 feet and 6'3", and Fred VanVleet's listed at 6'1". So you know what? Yeah, he looks small. I mean, I'm just going by what's listed. Maybe he's shorter in real life because he looks shorter, but I'm going by what's listed. He's listed at 6'1", and sure, there's going to be exceptions. How is he going to guard a point guard like Doncic? Well, guess what? Nobody's going to guard a point guard like Doncic. So if you're looking for a Doncic stopper, you're wasting your time. I've got to go with the best available assets that are there. I think that Fred would be a good fit. And I don't even want a player that's super dominant on offense because I just think that it could really mess up the chemistry of this team. This team is working. They're third in the West. They've had injuries to Ingram. If he was healthy, maybe they're the 1 seed right now. So I just wanted a player that could fit seamlessly. When Fred VanVleet was on that Raptors championship team, the backboard of him and Kyle were fantastic. And I would say he was their fourth best player behind Kawhi, Siakam, Kyle, and Fred. And in this situation, I think he would also be the fourth best player. But when Fred's your fourth best player, I think you're in a good position.
Wow. I definitely like that. Again, I figured you had some rationale there, and I like what I heard.
Okay. Then, Anil, thank you so much for coming on. As I said to all our guests, I'm forever indebted to all of you for participating. I would love for you to. I know you probably won't make any more moves given you're right at the tax line, but of course, offers always open for next year. I'm excited to have both of you participating. I'm indebted to both of you. Again, you could follow Anil on Twitter at Anil Gagner NBA. Go visit notradeclause.com where he is the co-founder. And Anil, anything else you need to plug or want to plug?
No, I just want to thank you guys for putting this together. I think you guys are doing a fantastic job. Hopefully people understand my rationale. So thank you guys for allowing me
I'll
to
let you know
share.
the feedback that we get, but the
Absolutely.
man reveals himself at last.
A great one.
See you guys. Thanks.
Appreciate you.
Thank you. And we're here with our fourth guest of the afternoon/evening. We have David Williams from the SportsEthos Grizzlies podcast, who obviously is obviously here with Corbin and I to talk about what he did as a participant, Memphis Grizzlies GM in the mock trade deadline exercise. So, David, first of all, how are you doing today?
Doing well, man. Doing well. That's
awesome.
Recovering from a cold, so I will mute periodically so I don't cough in your ear. But other than that, doing great.
Okay, awesome. So, Corbin and I talked about it in last episode when we kind of did our mock trade deadline intro. And the two teams I said I was most interested at the deadline were the Pelicans and the Grizzlies for similar reasons. Because they're both contenders who could, in my opinion, have a legitimate shot to win the West. And they both have a ton of assets that at their disposal that they could really make an upgrade if they really want to push their chips in. As we know, in this exercise, the Pelicans did do that. We just had, you guys just listened to us have Anil Long, who represented the Pelicans, and he made the trade for Fred VanVleet that has been pretty controversial across Twitter the past few days. So we heard his justification. Both Corbin and I agree his justification blew us away. Very sound, very logical, outside of the box thinking there. But David, for a team that I feel like could have done so much at the deadline, sometimes you don't need to oversimplify it, or you don't have to complicate things. The Grizzlies were the 2 seed last year with the second best record in the NBA. They're tied for the 1 seed in the West this year. Same thing, tied for the second best record in the NBA. Instead of making a splash move like Neil did with the Pelicans, you did one simple move. That move was, we have Danny Green's salary on the books, and the Grizzlies at this point basically have that deal in order to move it for salary matching purposes. I mean, sure, he could be a resourceful, usable player when he comes back for the playoffs, but he's 36 years old coming off a torn ACL late into last season because he tore it in the playoffs. So that's the real reason you have Danny Green. So instead of, really going for a huge, realistically, I would like the Grizzlies to go after OG Anunoby, but in this exercise, he wasn't even available anyway. Who knows if he'll be available in the actual deadline? I'm just saying an upgrade on the wing similar to that. But anyway, nonetheless, you traded Danny Green, Xavier Tillman, and then 2 second-round picks, a 2024 second through Toronto and a 2025 second via the Pelicans to the Knicks. You got Isaiah Hardenstein and you got Cam Reddish. Both rotation players, nothing wrong with it. In my opinion, though, again, Corbin and I said before we came on, we're going to be good cop, bad cop here. So I'm just going to go a little deeper and say, sure, you did okay. I mean, I know you're going to explain your rationale, so I don't want to give it away. But are we sure Cam Reddish could even play? I mean, he's going to be on his third team already, and everyone's like, oh, Cam Reddish fast. So the dude fell out of 2 rotations already. So,
but out of those the rotation, you can completely eliminate this Knicks rotation because everybody that is around basketball, everybody that knows Tom Thibodeau knows that he is not known for developing players. For heaven's sakes, Taj Gibson is 743 years old, and he was still getting rotation minutes over younger guys that needed to develop. So, yeah, there were some problems in Atlanta, And that's a little bit scary. But before they played a game in the NBA, a lot of the players in that draft class with Cam Reddish, RJ Barrett, Ja Morant, Zion Williamson, they thought that Cam Reddish was going to have the best NBA career out of that draft class.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that talent is gone. I took the gamble on getting Cam Reddish because of that upside. You know, he was a top 10 guy throughout high school. Like, he was always near the top of his class. He ends up going to Atlanta. And when they drafted him, that's the same year they go out and they add all of these veterans and they try to make a playoff push. It worked out. They get to the Eastern Conference Final. If that's your goal, congratulations, you've done well. But I think that they really hindered his development because he didn't have the minutes. Like, they just were not there. They were playing to win. And so Nate McMillan was playing veterans over him because he was playing to win the games, and rookies are going to make mistakes. Young guys are going to make mistakes. This Grizzlies coaching staff, they have shown like insane ability to develop guys. You look, they trade for DeAnthony Melton. They bring him to Memphis. Melton does great things. They end up moving on from him. That wasn't something that I was happy about, but you see change in his game. Kyle Anderson, they work with him. They get his 3-point shot looking better, and then he ends up having shoulder problems. But the 1 year where you saw the big breakout from Kyle Anderson, that was his coaching staff. He made more threes in one season than he has his entire career because of the development of this coaching staff. Kyle Anderson and DeAnthony Melton don't have the floor that Cam Reddish does. They don't have the ceiling that Cam Reddish does. And so because of what I've seen, and I just mentioned a couple guys, we can go on all day about what they've done with the other players on the Grizzlies. Because of what I've seen them do and what I think the potential upside of Cam Reddish is, that's why I made this move. This front office has always been very, cautious is not the right word, but they're not in a rush to push their chips in. You've not seen Zach Kleiman really make a massive splash. Like, people were pissed when he traded JV, and they're like, oh my God, why'd you do that? And then now they're like, JV who? Because Steven Adams fits so well in what this offense does. And I don't think it wouldn't surprise me at all if the Grizzlies go through this trade deadline and don't move anybody, because the value that Danny Green brings to this team is the championship experience. That's something nobody on this roster has. He's been there. He knows what to do. And I see him more of like a Udonis Haslem type role on this Memphis Grizzlies team. I don't know where, Zach Kleiman values him overall, but I would be shocked if they made a move at the trade deadline. And so for me, I was just looking at, okay, what are some things that they need to shore up? They need somebody that can score off of the bench. Cam Reddish can do that. He can do that already. He gets in there. He works with this coaching staff. They work on development. This offensive scheme would play very well into what he's able to do. So I thought that he would be a good fit. He's a wing with size. And while he's not been a great defender in the NBA, he has the length that he can be a serviceable defender. And with that size, that would be good enough. When you get into a playoff series, there are going to be times when Jaren Jackson gets in foul trouble and Steven Adams can't be out there at the end of the game because Steven Adams shoots 12% from the free throw line. So can you run Brandon Clark at the 5? Go back last year and watch what the Golden State Warriors done to Brandon Clark when he was on the floor. They absolutely destroyed him in the pick and roll. They went straight at Brandon Clark. They're like, okay, whoever Brandon Clark is guarding, you're screening for the ball handler. And they were just raining threes all day. And they were great looks because Clark, he just was not able to do what you would, expect him to be able to do. And so you need another guy, you need another big, I think, to kind of secure the back end of this bench. Hartenstein brings you a lot of the things that Steven Adams can do. He's a good passer from the big man spot. He's a good screener. He rebounds well, and he's a better rim protector than Steven Adams. So if you got Jaren in foul trouble, you still have somebody that can be a rim protector. And so it was kind of a twofold thing. I like the upside on Reddish, and I would love to have a scorer off of the bench. And I like the kind of security that Hartenstein brings to the big man rotation.
I like that. I was going to say, in terms of prioritizing when you went on this trade, who is the key player you're really looking at? Because obviously both fill a need for you. You described how both would fit in. But obviously, you came in looking for one, I imagine, and then if the other was available, you jumped on. Did you already have this package deal in mind? Kind of what was the thought process in terms of your target list?
So Steven can tell you how many, I feel like I pulled him into 5 or 6 different conversations to attempt to make trades. I was looking for an upgrade on the wing. The Grizzlies, as constructed, I think that they are capable of making the Western Conference Finals. I don't think they have enough scoring off of the bench to win the championship this year. Do we see development from Zaire Williams? Does David Roddy figure it out, or is it Jake LaRavia? Does something happen internally, or do you have to go out and get somebody? So I wanted an upgrade at the wing because you need somebody that can play defense out there, and you need somebody that can knock down threes. So I was looking at guys. I made a run at Malik Beasley.
Gary Trent was another one.
Yeah, we got really close on Malik Beasley. And I think that had this not gone through, I probably would have pulled the trigger on a deal for Malik Beasley. I tried to get Gary Trent Jr., and we were just kind of too far apart on that. He was looking for Zaire or Santi Aldama, and Gary Trent Jr. is going to be a rental. The future of this team is bright. I'm not going to risk the future of the team to get a short-term rental. Even if Gary Trent Jr. was the piece, there's no guarantee, right? Gary Trent Jr. would be like a dream fit for this team, but there's no guarantee that he gets you to the championship. And so I wasn't willing to add Aldama or Zaire Williams to that trade to bring in a Gary Trent Jr. And then I had very brief discussion with the Hornets and didn't really get anywhere with that one. And that some of that was my fault because I didn't realize the injury to Kelly Oubre. And then once I started looking at it, I'm like, crap, I'm not going to make this deal. So I just kind of folded out on that one. But as far as who I was targeting here, it's the wing. I have liked Cam Reddish. And in the times, game 1 of the season, New York played at Memphis, and Cam Reddish torched the Grizzlies. He was moving well without the ball, coming off screens, knocking down threes. He was getting downhill. He was doing everything that the Grizzlies need against the Grizzlies. And I feel like given the right opportunity and the right coaching staff, that you can see a better version of Cam Reddish. Do we see, does he ever make it to an all-star level? I don't know, but the Grizzlies don't need another all-star level player. They need somebody that can go out and get 15 points a game off of the bench and play decent defense.
Okay, I see. That makes a lot of sense to me. I am very high on Cam Reddish, as somebody who, I don't represent this team, but if I were the Lakers, I'd be looking at someone there just for a wing-sized player who I do think has potential, and I'm also not high on Coach Tibbs' potential of using youth. I think that he, if anything, drives down the trade value of these younger players because of how he treats them. You pointed out eloquently there, David, earlier. So I'm totally with you on that. I was just curious as to what you felt was a position need first. And I like that you go in looking for a wing and not only able to come and get a player that potentially fits that, definitely fits the timeline, but also, you back up a position as well with another capable player who replicates that style of play. I guess my last question would be, in terms of this trade, given Cam Reddish's financial situation, I think Hartenstein's in for a little bit. Do you have any plans on the long-term future of how that would work? Is this more like a flyer and just see what happens?
Yeah. So, obviously the hope would be that Reddish comes over to the Grizzlies. He gets to work with his coaching staff, and you see what you want to see from him. You see some positives from him. Well, then he's got to sign. I would imagine his age is going to get him a contract, but I think it's going to be more of a prove it deal. It's not going to be a big contract because even though he's had flashes, he hasn't proven anything. And so wherever he goes, somebody may offer him a little bit more. But if you're looking at it, it's like, okay, I can play rotation minutes on a playoff team and take a contract, like a prove it contract. And maybe the Grizzlies sign him for 2 years on a prove it deal. And then, who knows what happens from there. He goes out and plays up to his capability, and either they move him before the contract expires, or he's the piece that they need to push him over the top to get a championship, in which case this trade was fantastic and done everything that I wanted it to do.
Well,
Gotcha.
Cam Reddish is restricted. So theoretically, you're talking about this whatever prove it deal, few $1 million that he would probably get. Maybe he gets more, as you said, because of his age. But you could match whatever. And Memphis isn't even close to the tax. So let's say he gets offered, I don't know, 3 for 18, maybe. Maybe a little bit shorter, because he, again, prove it deals tend to be shorter, so he can get back on the market sooner. So let's say 2 for 12. You could match that, keep him back for $6 million a year next year and the following year. Or, quite frankly, you could sign and trade him, because there's not that many competing teams that have cap space. So, sure, maybe a rebuilding team would take a flyer on him, and then at that point, you really can't do a sign and trade. But again, you have the capabilities of matching with a restricted. So that's the good thing about always trading for a former first-round pick that's coming off the rookie deal, because you get the restricted rates. So, yeah, David, I like how you approached it. You killed 2 birds with 1 stone, for lack of a better term.
There it is.
Yep. And yeah, I mean, I think the Grizzlies might do something splashier, but again, that's just me from the front office aspect. It would make sense for them to, but obviously you're a lot more plugged into the team than I am, so maybe they don't. But either way, definitely. I don't think I think you said you're not going to be doing too many more moves at this point, correct?
I mean, I'm happy to talk to people, but
Of course.
After this trade, and like I feel like the roster's in a really good spot. And so, I don't know that there's anybody else on this roster that I would really want to move. I've had some people reach out to me about Tyus Jones, and I think that his value is it's more to the Grizzlies than what it would be to any other team.
Interesting.
So, it would take an overpay in order for me to move off of him. I really like Kennedy Chandler. I'd said during the draft season, if Tyus walked, I would be fine if Kennedy Chandler was a replacement, because I feel like Kennedy Chandler plays smart basketball and he could be a great backup point guard. The thing that he can't do is when Ja Morant is out, you see Tyus Jones go and he's dropping 20, 24, 25 points a game. He's orchestrating the offense and he's showing that he can be a 1 guard. I don't think that Kennedy Chandler is going to do that his rookie season, but I think the faith in Kennedy Chandler is kind of shown based off of what they gave Tyus Jones. They gave Tyus Jones kind of that short deal. Some of that was obviously cap space, but I think that my guess is that they would like to develop Kennedy Chandler as their backup and then either move Tyus or let Tyus go to wherever he wants to go moving forward. Because I think that there are still places in the NBA where Tyus can go and be a starting point guard.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, his assist to turnover ratio has always been spectacular throughout his career. The guy can make shots. He runs the floor of a team very well on the floor. You see the way the Grizzlies play without Ja, which obviously they're better with Ja, but the record without just shows how capable, Tyus is there. I mean, listen, you want an overpay out Kyrie for Ja, straight up. Let's just get this deal done.
Not enough. Not enough.
Not in a million years, but I've said to myself I was going to throw at least one ridiculous trade offer out to at least every guest. I think I got 2 out of the 4 we talked through today, so that works out for me.
You got somebody to buy it on craziness.
Oh, you know what's funny? I'm gonna reveal it to both of y'all real quick, since it's not gonna happen. Although I might make a deal with this person, so hopefully it all works out well. But I was very close to acquiring Keegan Murray.
Keegan Murray's been available, which has been
Keegan,
surprising.
For Royce O'Neal.
Oi.
Straight up.
Oi.
And now, mind you, I will say this, to give him credit, he took a day to think about it and said, absolutely. Actually, I don't know what I was thinking when I brought that up. But I was like...
He's offered Keegan to multiple teams, and I kind of had to mess with him, like, okay, come on. They just use a 4th pick on him. Like,
I know. I said, listen, I love Royce O'Neal. He'd be helpful, but Keegan for the future, like, who for Brooklyn? Like, okay, no need to trade for Kyle Kuzma if we can get a forward like that who's like 22. So it's hilarious. I mean, you never know. And sometimes, I mean, I like that kind of crazy aspect. We were talking about this before, Steven, because for every trade that you want to go realistic, there always is that one or two trades that are just way out in left field. Now that would never happen, but then we thought the same thing for Tyrese Halliburton
That's
for
exactly
Domantas
what I was
Sabonis.
just
So
gonna
yeah, so there you go, exactly.
Never in a million years you would have thought the Kings were going to move off Tyrese Halliburton,
No.
and then they did.
And
Never
listen,
in a million years I think Rudy Gobert was going to be worth 4 unprotected picks plus a guy who was just drafted in the first round plus all this other crap on top. Like there's. That's why when I know we just had a Neil on and we talked about all the hate that I've been getting and Neil will be getting on Twitter because everyone's like, oh, they will move Dyson Daniels, blah, blah, blah. If real life NBA GMs are wanting to pull the trigger on some of these ridiculous trades, then it's not so far. Like, as we said in episode 1, last year we had a Pascal Siakam trade happen. We had a Fred VanVleet trade happen, and everyone thought we were crazy. And now we're a year later, and those things
we'll throw on the block potentially.
Up.
Yeah.
So
it's you never know. I always go back to the Kyle Kuzma, KCP, and who was it? Yeah. It's for all year long. Lakers fans and Lakers fans, they're gonna move these 3 for a superstar. They're gonna move these, and it's like it's not gonna happen. Those guys are not gonna net you a star. And then the trade that they made, it didn't work out right because the fit. Russ is not a shooter. He just doesn't fit well with that squad. But if you had said before that trade happened, they're going to send Kuzma, KCP, and Harrell, and they're gonna net Russ Westbrook, everybody would have told you you're out of your mind.
That's true as well.
You know, like stuff like this does happen.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are the Kings going to move Keegan Murray? I find that like extremely unlikely. I don't, and especially not for a Royce O'Neal, but you know, you got to shoot your shot. You never know. And maybe I was talking to one of my buddies and he's like, why did you do 2 seconds there instead of just like offering Danny Green and X? And I was like, well, the contract for Hartenstein is tradable. And so I wanted to give some value there because Danny Green and X for Hartenstein and Cam Reddish, it's just not enough. And so I added a second thinking that he would counter with something different, but he jumped right on it. And I'm like, sweet, I'm cool with it. Like we don't have to talk about anything else. But I just thought the Hartenstein contract was enough to add the picks to that. So
there you go. And that's the way sometimes it goes, you know?
Okay. Then this concludes episode 2 of the mock trade deadline preview. Everything, as I told you guys, well, it's going to be its own section on the site where you could click on sportsethos.com, mock trade deadline, and then you could click on the team to see who the team's negotiating for, what trades the team has made. It'll be very inclusive. I promise I won't let you guys down on that aspect. Otherwise, we have had 4 guests on today, all come on to rationalize trades they've made. Corbin and I will be releasing part 3 of this sometime next week where we'll have 4 more guests on. Mm-hmm. So, David, let's start with you. Where can everybody find you?
Sure. So I cover the Grizzlies for Sports Ethos. You can get that show on Twitter at Ethos Grizzlies, and I am at NBA DWill21. All on Twitter, by the way. Yeah. Nowhere else.
Horrible Grizzly takes, but great guy. I'm just kidding.
Oh, man. Before we go, Steven, like you, I feel like you were holding back on this trade. So I would like, what's your honest opinion on this deal? And I know you from the front office side of it, you feel like the Grizzlies have the tools to make a bigger trade, but if they just made a fringe move like this, would it be like, are you disappointed with this move?
It's not that I'm disappointed. It's just more so, when you have higher expectations and then just something okay happens, you're like, okay, yeah, I'm not disappointed, but I was just expecting more. I think that's what is comparable to the fact that the Grizzlies do have an opportunity to really be splashy and really push those chips in. But, I'm not going to fault you for not doing that. So, no, but I think once you rationalize it to me, like, think about it. Steven Adams got played off the floor last year in the playoffs. Brandon Clark got eaten alive. Like, okay, you got the big man. Corbin and I have discussed it. on multiple pods where, and I sound like a broken record to my listeners at this point, there's no such thing more important in the NBA in today's game than wing depth. And while you did kill two birds with one stone, like I said, Cam Reddish needs to prove to me that, he's legitimate wing depth on a title contender. And as we said, Memphis is probably the best player development situation in the NBA. So if Cam Reddish can't figure it out on Memphis, I don't know if he will. I
agree. He's not going to do it.
That's my assessment of it, is that wing depth is just so important. And the trade, to me, I know you're higher in Reddish than I am, was more center focused. Which is fine, because Hardenstein could very well win you a playoff game or two when it matters.
And that's, if you look at what Zaire Williams has done this year, he hasn't played much and he's not really looked very good. But I still think that there is a lot of upside there from him as well. And that's something I think a lot of Grizzlies fans are holding on to. They're like, that, they've got to go out and make this move. They've got to make this move. And it's like, man, they're first place in the West right now. And we have not even seen the best version of Zaire Williams. He's not even flashed what he was doing at the end of last season yet. The last time I looked, he was shooting something like 13% from three. He's not going to do that. He's going to shoot better than that from three. And so, you're looking, I think that they said he measured like 6'10" coming into the season. So a 6'10" wing that can handle the ball and he can shoot better than 13%. So I think that there is a strong possibility that the Grizzlies have enough on this roster to make that run. It's just, people have to develop, and there's still plenty of basketball left in order for that to happen. And for me, I won't be severely disappointed if they don't make a move at the trade deadline, but I know a lot of people that will be.
Okay, Corbin. Again, this is going on your feed as well. Promote whatever you want to promote. Lay it on our listeners.
Appreciate it, y'all. Thank you so much, Steven, again. Thanks for David for joining. Listen, y'all can find me, if you're so inclined, on Twitter at CorbinNBA. Once again, as we always say across all of our shows, check out Sports Ethos on Twitter at SportsEthos, SportsEthos. Online, SportsEthos.com. They have everything: basketball, football, baseball, disc golf. Disc golf. You want it, they have it. So check them out one more time on Twitter at SportsEthos, online, SportsEthos.com. But that's all I got on my end. I'm gonna let you close, Steven. I closed on ours, you close on this one. That's how we cross over.
Okay, you guys can find me on Twitter at BirdRightsPod. You guys can email me, birdrightspod@gmail.com. Okay. I said on our last episode when Corbin was hyping up what we called the Mock Trade Deadline Primer / Manifesto.
Yes.
I've gotten some emails and some Twitter DMs asking people to, for me to send it to them.
Over.
So anyone who wants to look at it, it's 120-page, all-inclusive. Everything you need to know about the trade deadline, whatever move you think whatever team could make, will make, should make based off salary, it's all in there. So anybody who's interested in that, either DM me, tweeted me, email me. I'll be glad to send it over. Corbin and I are getting copies made of it from Barnes & Noble Primer. Barnes & Noble, not a sponsor of the Bird Rights podcast, but we are going to be having hard copies of it to have for future years. Yeah, so thank you, gentlemen. Thank you to everyone who's previously been on. I know I already thanked you guys earlier today. And thanks to all the participants that have already, been a part of the exercise. Obviously, it's not just me. It's myself and 29 other people that were willing to take their free time, spare time to do an exercise like this. And shout out to Dane, Drew, Steven, Panda, the whole Sports Ethos team for giving me a platform to be able to do this, being able to, get a whole page of the site dedicated to this, because as a lot of I've worked my ass off to put this all together. So I definitely appreciate people recognizing it. So again, you guys could follow all three of us. I highly recommend you do. Actually, all 30 of us. I'm going to release everyone's handles on Twitter in the coming days so you can see everyone who's participating in this. And otherwise, Corbin and I will talk to both Roundball Ramble listeners, Bird Rights listeners next week with 4 more new guests. Thank you guys for listening, and we will talk to you next week.